So today we are going to talk a bit about upgrading with Deploy OS. Before we get started, though, let's introduce ourselves. I know a lot of you have been calling in through the last few weeks, but for those of you that are new, I'm Heather, one of the product specialists here in Philadelphia. You can see I've worked in infrastructure for a while. I went to Drexel University, and you could tell from the slide, I like beluga whales and Formula One racing and traveling. And I'm looking forward to the Singapore Grand Prix this weekend.
Great. So my name is Johan Söderström. I have also been working for a long time with the infrastructure and especially with deployments. I'm also product specialist at Specops, and as Heather and me went to Portugal a couple of weeks ago, so I like to travel into other countries. Always a technology geek, and I love food and wine, and I'm not that kind of guy that like Formula One. I like bikes more.
You like racing your bikes?
Yeah. So you can see my picture of my bike.
There you go.
Used to be my bike.
Yeah, and here in Philadelphia, we're getting a little crazy. Waiting for the Pope to come and the World Meeting of Families. So I can tell you, I've never seen a city get quite so crazy it's been getting here. So let's get started talking about our webinar series here. So you can see it's evolved since we started this. This is our upgrade week. And we have 2 more weeks scheduled now after this week. 2 weeks, we are going to be talking about capturing. Everything you wanted to know about capturing and then some, capturing images. So I really hope you can join us in 2 weeks. I know Johan's excited for that week. And then
that would be a great week for you guys. Yeah, all the things that you should do and shouldn't do, I will tell you.
So it's going to be a good week. And then October 15th, we are doing Rohan's Top 10. For those of you who might not know, Rohan is our top support guy in North America, and we are going to go over his top 10 deploy support issues that he wants to come up. So he'll be joining us, and I just hope that will be a fun week for everyone. So let's get started today. What are we going to talk about? I'm going to give you a brief update about where we're at with Windows 10. And then we're going to talk about upgrading Deploy itself, because a lot of times with new versions of operating systems, we do have to upgrade Deploy. And then we're going to go over best practices, procedures, some of our thoughts on upgrading your client operating systems, client applications. And then always, we have lots of time for questions and answers. So if you have questions as we're going through something, just type them in there in the WebEx. And I promise you, we will get to every question towards the end. So ask away. We like questions. So Windows 10, I know originally when we planned this webinar, we had hoped to be doing a webinar on Windows 10 and Deploy. But as you can see from the slide here, the Windows 10 support is delayed. A lot of you know who are customers or looking at Deploy that MDT is one of the main core components that Deploy OS uses. And when Microsoft did release MDT 2013 Update 1, which had the Windows 10 support, there was a lot of known issues and a lot of bugs with it. So it's really not ready to use it for an automated deployment like we need with Deploy. So we're waiting for the next version. They're going to give an update out in a few weeks. And once that version's out, then Deploy, we're going to be able to get a version of Deploy that will support the deployment of Windows 10 operating systems out. I put a copy of one of the Technic articles up here. We'll send that out in the post-webinar email if you want to have the link to take a look at it to understand if you're interested in all the technical reasons behind this. So Windows 10 support will come for Deploy. We're ready, we're working on it, but we have that dependency. And whenever that does happen, Johan and I, we will do a webinar on Windows 10, but we don't want to promise a date when we're not sure that's going to happen. So stay tuned. But as we do go through the webinar today, we are going to make references to some things to get you thinking about and getting ready for Windows 10. So with that being said, let's talk about Deploy itself, because once we have the support for Windows 10, you are going to have to upgrade Deploy to a new version. There's going to be prerequisites. MDT and ADK will both need to be upgraded. And then as we go through upgrading, it's going to be the same process that you've done. You upgrade the image server, and then you do upgrade your deployment server. And for those of you who've never done an upgrade, it's easy. The image server is done through the Setup Assistant like we always do. And Johan, can you open up the OS Admin Console for me briefly for the deployment server?
Yes.
Yes, and go to the server tab. And it's so simple. When you want to do your deployment server, you just right click there on your deployment server and you hit upgrade from there. So that's not through a setup assistant. Very simple from in here. And if you have multiple deployment servers, you hit them all there and it gets upgraded and you're good to go.
Yeah, and you can do it here in grid view also. So if you have 50 deployment servers, you can just mark them all and right click on them and just upgrade. So you can upgrade them at the same time.
Sweet and simple and to the point. And can we go back to the slides? So you do your deployment servers. Deploy app will have an upgrade also. You can just go through the setup assistant for that. And then the client-side extension, that's the big one. A lot of times people aren't sure because once they do the server bits, they forget the client-side extension. And we do use group policy for that. It's not hard, but it gets overlooked a lot of times and you should do it. So Johan's going to go through and give us a short demo on how you upgrade your client-side extensions.
Absolutely. So that also is really easy. But sometimes when people tend to upgrade, they always forget about the clients. Sometimes when a customer has upgraded a couple of times, they're still using very old client-side extension. So let's open up the group policy that has the client-side extension software installation in it. As you can see here, it's a new one, but I will actually demonstrate to remove it. So you remove the old one and you say immediately uninstall it. And then new package. Go to your latest version. In this time, it will be the 64-bit April version that we have here in our demo environment. So I will, on the 64-bit package, I will just assign it. I will do the same with the 32-bit package, but instead of assigning it, I use advanced. Go to the tab deployment, advanced, and untick make this 32-bit x86 application available to Windows 64 machines because we have a native 64-bit client-side extension. Then you're good to go. Next time my clients are rebooting, they will actually uninstall the old client-side extension and will be installing the new version.
Perfect. See, it's not that hard.
No, it's quite easy.
Quite easy. So, and once you have your deploy environment upgraded, then we will be good for the new OS. So now we're going to just talk about in general upgrading your client machines. We're going to go over, some good things to think about. So I'm going to go through a bunch of slides that we're going to talk about your boot image, hardware support and drivers, what you do with your new base OS coming in, some of the options, the ways to do your reinstalls, and then group policies and applications. So can you hit the next slide for me? Boot image and drivers. And I know maybe we've talked about this in the last couple webinars, but it's important, and we've seen in our experience and working with our customers that this is where I think some of the confusion and a lot of errors and problems come up the most. A good process to follow, because now we're going to a new operating system. So you're going to need new drivers. You need to go to your manufacturer's website to get the latest drivers there. And the big thing is your driver management folder structure. You need to put that new OS folder in there because we don't want to lump all of the OS into the model. And do you want to pull that up, driver management up, Johan, so everyone can see what I'm talking about? We talk about the folder structure. And sometimes I've seen where customers, and I used to do this myself until I was corrected by Johan, that I would put everything in the model folder. But then when you want to do cleanup and stuff, it gets really, really confusing. So it's really good to sort out those OS ones. So once we have support for Windows 10, you'll have that option to make that Windows 10 folder and just keep it organized, because down the line, when Windows 7's gone, you can just whack that folder and clean up your environment. And WinPE, do you want to talk about the WinPE folder?
Yeah, the WinPE folder, we have discussed that in the latest webinar 2 weeks ago. We talk about WinPE, that you can actually make sure that the boot image is using only the drivers for that correct OS. So WinPE in MDT and ADK 8.1 is using Windows 8.1. So if you have problems to connect to your deployment server from the WinPE when you are PXE booting, just add that driver into this folder, publish, and do a new PXE, and you will be able to deploy that new version of model anyway, even if you don't have any drivers for that model in here. Because you may be going to deploy a Windows 7 box, and Windows 7 drivers is not good to have on a WinPE. So that's why I like to have the boot image on one side of the driver store and the model drive for the installation on the other side of all the models.
Yeah, and if you're not quite sure, we're talking about the WinPE, the advanced topics webinar that we did, that actually we go through all the steps and how to create that. So if you're interested in that, or you want to know how to go back again and do that, take a look at that webinar, because that's really a great procedure that Johan came up with to make it easier, because if you're doing an older OS that isn't up to the same version that the WinPE runs in, it makes your driver situation much easier.
Absolutely, and when you upgrade in the deployment solution, you will actually upgrade to Windows 10. The next one, you will upgrade to Windows 10. Then you can just whack out that Windows 8.1 from WinPE and create a Windows 10 folder structure and start adding Windows 10 drivers if you need to. It's very simple, and it will be clean forever.
Yes. All right, next slide, please. So the new operating system. When you deploy for the first time you installed it, the first thing you had to do was import a base OS. We call it the vanilla image or ISO files of an operating system. And that because underlying an MDT, that's how it creates its task sequence and all that good stuff to support and be able to deploy the operating system. So same thing's going to happen when you get it. You're going to have your new operating system for whatever you're upgrading that your client machines are going to go to. So you must import that base operating system first. Then you can start creating your captures and captured images and then importing multiple ones of them into deploy. But we're not going to really go into details on that today because, like I said, in 2 weeks, we are going to give you the deepest dive view of capturing you've ever had. So we'll really get into that. But just know when you want to do an upgrade, you have to put that base operating system in. And if you're supporting both 32 and 64-bit, you must put the base operating system for each into deploy. Then, once you have your operating system, you might have your various captures, you're set to go. How do you know what images to go on the machine? Group policy. We use group policy to filter and set what we want to put on the client machines. And, Johan, you could pull up the GPMC for us so we could just show some examples of how we do that, because that's what gives us that wonderful automated way of pushing out an operating system without having to hit F12 and select images manually.
Yeah, so this is, for instance, our demo environment. We have Windows 7 and 8.1. So we have two group policies. As you can see here, it's located in demo machines. So it's filtering on authenticated users. But now, if I'm going to my other group policy for 8.1, you can see there is a group called Windows 8.1 in here. So if you can see here, that 8.1 has link order 9. And the 7 has link order 10. That means if you're not into that group, you will get Windows 7. If you add that machine to Windows 8.1 client group, you will get 8.1. That simple is it.
And it depends upon your AD too, because your AD, every AD has a different structure in the way you're formed. So we can't say, hey, this way is the way to do it. It's really going to depend upon you. Some places, some organizations have one image, some have many, depending upon your needs, but that's the great use of group policy, that it's so flexible. All right, next slide, please. All right, reformat or reinstall. So I get a lot of questions on this. Depends upon what you're doing, but that default reinstall option, when you see that come up in the reinstall wizard, when you use that, and we're talking about you're not pre-staging, because we're upgrading. So we're doing existing machines. So you're going to probably either reinstall from the OS admin console or from users and computers, do our little right-click reinstall. The default reinstall, it boots into WinPE from the client-side extension. It does not do a PXE boot. So to do a reinstall, you have to have a group policy object, not using the default deploy policy, and you have to have the checkbox saying allow reinstallation when operating system's running on top of that. And I know in the last few weeks we've gone over that. So you need to have that, and you need to have the client-side extension for this to work. Now, default has two types. You could do a reinstall with saving user data and one without. When you save the user data, it's going to save some of your profile data, and it's going to be local profiles only. So after you do your upgrade, that data is brought back. So that's the difference with a reinstall versus when you do the reboot and reformat. That's going to do a PXE boot, and you're not going to have any user data saved. So I know a lot of times it's unclear what to do for that. I will take a note. For the reinstall, we do save all of the users' profiles. So it's every profile. So if it's a machine that 10 people is logged on, you're going to get 10 profiles back. So if you're going to use this and you think you might have some dirty machines like that, clean your profiles up first if you don't want them brought back, because that could take a little bit of time. Johan, did I miss anything? Anything else we need to add here?
Absolutely not. I can
usually have something to add.
No. That sounds really good. So, do you want me to show how a default reinstallation looks like?
Perfect. Yes, please. That actually would be a good one to show, because, and I did not mention this. See, I forgot something. For the reinstall, Johan will show this. If we don't do the gpupdate tick box, everyone says nothing's happening. And this is why I want you to do this, so we can explain how to get it actually kicked off the proper way. See, that's why I have you here.
So
You would remember everything I forget.
So I have my Foxtrot 3 machine that I'm gonna reinstall. So I open up my ADAC and right-click on Foxtrot 3 and say I'm gonna do a reinstall. So I will use default discard user data. I will not tick box this attempt gpupdate because I want to show you guys that it's all about group policies. So that's why Specops is so cool. We are all using normal group policies into this. So as you can see here now, if I open up this deployment, you can see here I have my Foxtrot 3. So actually it's in pending state. That means that I have done one object saying next time a group policy refresh or a PXE boot happens, it will be reinstalled. So I'm going to my Foxtrot 3 machine and just run a gpupdate. So what do you think, Heather? What will happen?
Now that you're on the gpupdate, it should be good to go.
Think it will actually do reinstall this machine. So it takes a couple of seconds.
Yeah, it's not as it's like, because I think a lot of times everyone expects like bam, it should start happening, and a reinstall there's a slight delay until it kicks off usually.
Absolutely. So let's see.
Unless a demo curses after us, sometimes that does happen.
The BDD run is running right now, so that's good. So hopefully the reinstallation will occur soon. Who knows? It's always.
Yeah, and there we go. And there's been times I've gotten feedback from customers that they've run the wizard, they don't check for the automatic gpupdate, they say nothing happened, so then they'll go about doing their business, and all of a sudden they're like, it just started reinstalling. That's because the automatic group policy refresh happened at that time, and it got kicked off. So, or it started the process, and then there we go.
So this is the beauty with the product. What we're doing now, we are actually downloading the WinPE to the machine. So that's so you don't have to use PXE at all. So you only use PXE the first time you introduce a machine to your AD. If you have a bare metal machine, you deploy that with PXE. Otherwise, you only have to do a default reinstallation, and you don't have to fiddle around with your BIOS settings at all with the boot order at all. So this is very nice for admins.
Yeah, and also you don't have to go through and pre-stage every time. You don't have to kill your computer account. You don't have to gather that MAC address. So, and I know a lot of times the deploy customers, they kind of get into that whole, we have to pre-stage in Pixie. And I'm like, there's a lot of other good ways to do it without that. So that's why we want to take the time to show you how to kick off a reinstall. All right, applications. So, and this is the reason why I want to talk about applications today, because as Johan and I were planning this out, I said, how many times, because all of you who do use app deploy, you know you're targeted. When you do a reinstall, you refresh your machine, so you're still targeted for those same applications, because your computer account's not being deleted, not changing. So once you go through that operating system upgrade, you log in, you get that first group policy refresh, all those same targeted applications you're targeted for are going to start to come back. Now, that's great because that's one of the nice things about deploy is you get your applications back. But do those applications work on your new operating system? So if you're going from 7 to 8, or it'll be 8 to 10, we don't know which ones are supported by 10, or at this point you don't know yet. So you have to test and evaluate because, Johan, there's a couple that for Windows 10 aren't working anymore, right?
Absolutely. The most common scenario is when you go from 7, you go to 8 or 8.1, and the Flash is one of those that Microsoft has built in nowadays in the operating system, because there was so much security hazards in the Flash application. So that's why they built this into the product instead. So you cannot install the same Flash play that you did on the Windows 7 box. So that will fail. So how can you solve that problem, Heather? If you upgraded from Windows 7 and 8 and you're testing it and you have a target pointing to all the machines, how can you solve that to not pointing to the new operating system?
Oh, it's so easy. I would say add target criteria to filter on the operating system. So,
exactly.
So why don't you pull that up for us so we can look at, so keep your existing applications intact if you're still running that old OS. But like we say, for example, we can say, well, those old deployments targeted just to run on Windows 7 or 8. So then your Windows 10 machines, once you have the new OS, it's not going to get that. So why don't you show us?
Exactly. So what we do here now, if I have an application now, I know it's not going to work. Let's say this endpoint protection will not work on 8 or 8.1 or Windows 10 or whatever I'm going to do. So what I'm doing here now, I have a standard target. I have a standard Windows 7, a standard Windows 8.1. That means the standard means it hits all the operating system. This standard Windows 7 target just hits the Windows 7 boxes, and standard Windows 8.1 only hits the Windows 8.1 boxes, of course. So what can you do if you have a deployment that is targeted to a standard target to just hit Windows 7 and 8.1, because that's the only operating system that will work with this application. Windows 10 will not support it. So what can you do? Yeah, you create a new target, of course. How do you call that? Standard Windows 7 so it will hit OU demo machines, and we add 2 criteria called operating system 7 and Windows 8.1. Add. Okay. So if I have that target, and then I can lift on one of the deployments for one of the operating systems that I don't like. So let's say on the target 8. Let's see, standard, I have endpoint protection. Okay. So let's do that and edit that. So from standard, I will actually just hit the standard Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 computer. So it will still be working in our demo environment, even if I've changed this. I just press OK on this one. Now, actually, I can deploy a Windows 7 machine, and endpoint protection will not be applied to that operating system. Simple.
Simple. And it's nice. And then you could start creating targets for the new Windows 10 or with your new operating system, and then with the software for that. So
exactly, it's your application that sets what is a standard. Okay,
yes.
So if you have a new standard called Windows 10, maybe you need to have a target because you have just an application that will only work for Windows 10. Mm-hmm. Then you need to have a standard Windows 10 target, and then you can add applications to that target.
Yeah, and I think the operating system targets are very powerful because a lot of times it's done in a mindset by OUs, and then the OU has computer objects in it with mixed operating systems. So this way, you don't have to mess around and change your AD, but yet we could still target what we need to target correctly.
Exactly.
Perfect. And let's see, next slide. The last topic we want to cover is cleanup time. Because as time goes on, especially if you've been a deploy user for a very long time, there's a lot of things in there and it can get kind of messy. What do we do to clean up? Well, like I mentioned earlier, we can clean up the old driver folders. So if your drivers are sorted by OS, you're fully on Windows 10, maybe you can delete that Windows 7 folder. You don't need that anymore. Images, cautiously, we say, because we don't want you to go in and remove all of your old images and realize you need it. But good rule of thumb is anything that's 2 or 3 images behind. So for example, once you're on the Windows 10, you may want to leave your Windows 8 images in there. And at that time, you're not using 7 anymore. Clean it out. Just clean it out of your OS admin console. Same thing for packages and deployments. We say I always go by the 2 versions back rule of thumb too. So once Java and Adobe every other month they're coming out with something new, well, keep one old one, maybe one before that, and clean it out. What techniques you usually follow, Johan? Is that about the same, or?
Yeah, more or less. It depends on how often I have to upgrade, because sometimes when people travel and they take vacations and all that, so it depends on how long time before you done an upgrade. If you just do a package once a year, you can have one old. But if you have to upgrade a package, let's say 3 times a month, then I would save maybe 4 or 5 packages or deployments, because they are sometimes people tend to come to work after 3 weeks, and then they will actually be undeploying a very old package in my mind and get the latest version. So it depends on how often you upgrade the packages.
Sounds good, but keep in mind though, just always use some caution. Don't overdo your removing of the old drivers, because then it'd be a bunch of work to bring it back. But it's nice to get cleaned up because you're going to save drive space and all that stuff. So is it time? Q&A time, my favorite time. So please, whatever questions you have, start typing it in. We have a few in there already. Let's just start going through the list of which ones to address. Last subject we talked about. Should you delete your old computer deployments in the OS admin console? What do you say?
You want me to answer that?
Sure, you go for it, Johan.
No, you don't have to do that. That's basically your history, so you can actually see when that computer was reinstalled or installed. So leave it. You don't have to do that. You don't have to clean up anything in the admin console. If you don't, like to have very clean admin consoles.
See, I like clean consoles, but then you don't have your history. So what do you do when your console though gets so messy, Johan? Do you want to can you pull up that? Because
absolutely.
Because sometimes I know you get a lot of deployments going on.
So as you can see here, I have a lot of pending machines. So these guys, I can remove them by ticking and unticking these boxes. So I don't care about the pending ones. I just want to see my in progress machine. So if I'm gonna do grid view and do succeeded, then I gotta have a real messy console. Okay, so I can if I want to just remove them, no problem at all. But I like to know when this machine was reinstalled and so on. So
but if you remove that information, is there any downside to that?
No, it's no downside at all. It's just you cannot see the history anymore when the installation started and stopped. So it's just maintaining your it's like a log for the admin. So
Okay.
it will not take any resources for the server or anything.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. So Mike is asking here that he's used app deploy with Windows 10 already to deploy his applications. You just said in the beginning it wasn't supported. Why does app deploy work? Well, it's not officially supported yet. So we haven't done a release of deploy that does support Windows 10. But yes, some applications might work to go out to Windows 10. So it will work, but it's not supported at this point. So,
yeah, and also it's the client-side extension actually that it will work because Microsoft they are still using group policies. So the client-side extension, the part that actually install application, that actually reacts on a group policy refresh and reads an app deploy group policy, that component will be working absolutely. But the developers have to test it very a lot testing before they can say that we support it, because Microsoft changed some stuff sometimes. So to make sure it will work flawless as it had done in the past, we need to test it. So officially, we don't support it, but yes, it will work. I have tested it in my test environment and in my home environment, and it's flying. It's no problem at all.
For app deploy, though, right?
For app deploy, correct.
Yeah, because OS deploy will not work yet, and we've tried it. I've had customers contact me and who tried it, and that has because of the dependencies. Just to be clear. So.
Yes.
All right. Toss is asking, is there a way to update drivers without making software packages or rebuilding? I don't think so, Johan. Would you? Well, no, I think you'd have to do some sort of drive packages and app deploy if you don't want to rebuild, right?
No, that is MDT stuff you're talking about. So that's pure MDT knowledge. So we are usually, you can use MDT if you want to with Specops. It's no conflict, but we like our app deploy product so much. So we think it's good to have a clean MDT environment that's only pushing out the operating system, and then while the machine is starting up, it will get the client-side extension. It will start reading the group policies and start installing all the good stuff that you have. Because the problem when you do thick images or things in MDT, they tend to get old. Okay, so but with Specops App Deploy, if you upgrade deployment with Office or whatever, all the machines will have the same version everywhere. So you don't have to rebuild your image because you have installed manually an old Office system or something in it. So we tend to love app deploy after the OS deploy. So that's my belief.
But there's no way through deploy we don't update your drivers without either putting them in the driver management and doing a rebuild or making a package in app deploy. Like we don't have an auto driver update. That would be wonderful, but unfortunately the technology is limited and doesn't work that way.
No, absolutely not. It will not work.
That would be great. Not a problem. Do you always have to upgrade the CSC when you upgrade your version of deploy? Well, it's backwards compatible, so it'll still work, but you're not going to get the new features of the new client-side extension. So it's always best to upgrade as soon as you can.
And of course, the new features can be Windows 10 or whatever. So sometimes when the client-side extension comes out, it will support new operating systems. So that's why it's important to upgrade the client-side extension also.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's see. We have another one coming in from Colleen. She says, what kind of data is saved when you do a default reinstall? I'm going to let you take this one, Johan.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we are doing a default. We are using something called I lost the word.
For
USMT.
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 Yes,
yeah.
USMT.
So we are actually using something called USMT, and that's actually we're taking all from the machine. So if you add a local user to the admin group and you're using default reinstallation, you will actually replace that again. So when you reinstall the machine, you will actually add that account to that local admin group again. So that's really cool features. And if you add stuff into a temp folder on C drive, it will actually save that data also. So that's why you will not get a very clean compute when you have reinstalled. You will actually get the same amount of data that you had before, but you can do what it's good that you can go from Windows 7 up to 8.1 and actually save your user data and get it back. So all the profiles and a lot of other stuff that is both good and bad on the client. Was that a good answer, you think?
Yes. Yeah, that's a great answer. And Josh, you're asking about reformat and reinstall. Oh, here we go. The rest of your questions coming through. Can you do a reboot and reformat via gpupdate, or is that only the default reinstall? There's two different things. So via gpupdate, the gpupdate is not a reboot and reformat, because that's you have to do a restart for that to get kicked off. So the default reinstall and the reinstall discard user data, there needs to be a gpupdate. Now, if you're talking about going into ADUCT, where you can right-click and say operating system reinstall from users and computers, yes, you can do a reboot and reformat that way. And also, if you do select reinstall from the OS admin console, the wizard comes up, you have the option to do a reboot and reformat. So did that answer your question, Josh? Let us know if you need to be more specific on that.
And also you have a tick box saying restart your computer when you do
Yes.
it, when you do the reboot and reformat. So from the admin console, you can actually, or from the ADUC, you can actually manage your computer with a pixie. You don't have to go to the machine and restart it. If you don't want to, you can untick that also. It's up to you.
Yes. So, but you can kick that off a couple ways. So, Bashar is asking, hello, how are you? Any possible future support for Mac OS deployment? Your Mac OS computers are Active Directory connected, integrated. It would be great, wouldn't it? But unfortunately, right now, we do only support Windows. Haven't heard of any talk about Macs in the future yet, because client-side extensions, complete different operating system structure. So not that I know of. Johan, would you have any more to add to that?
Yeah, more or less. We are depending on MDT and ADK right now, and until Microsoft talk to Apple and say, let's support your operating system also, we kind of having a big problem to support Mac OS X. Then we need to build that type of solution completely ourselves to get Mac OS X and the Linux and all the other operating system support.
So you never know, right? Maybe one day Microsoft and Apple will merge.
I hope they will, because I really want to have a broader product. I like to be able to maintain all operating systems and also have app deploy for Apple computers. That would be cool.
Definitely. So, all right, we have a few more coming in here. I love questions. So, in the OS deploy group policy, do the two images listed need to be the same OS? So actually, do you want to pull up you could default policy there even, or one of them.
Because, you mean
either place that or in the group policy object. We list the operating system for 32 and 64-bit in there. And they're asking does that have to be the same OS? So no, you don't have to have both Windows 7 images in there. You could have a 32-bit Windows 7 and 64-bit Windows 8.1. It's just whatever you want your system to be for that default policy or your group policy object for that. How do I know if my application will work with Windows 10?
Yes, how will you know that, Heather?
Test. You know, you have to make sure you test it. So obviously, your vendor will give you documentation. You can search and see if it's Windows 10 compatible. The best way to know, as we've had customers out there using App Deploy with Windows 10, and the application's coming out, you test it. That's the best way to go.
Yeah, manually install Windows 10. Import it to your AD, and client-side extension will hit that machine, read the group policies, and the application will fall onto that machine. And if it works, it works. Otherwise, it will not work. Then you need to upgrade that application to a later version, or as I explained, that you have to play a little bit around targets and make sure that typical application will not end up on a Windows 10 machine.
Exactly. Good point. So one last question coming in, unless anyone else has any more you want to type in. Matthew's asking, when you upgrade your version of Deploy, should you upgrade your version of SQL?
It's not necessary. We are supporting right now SQL 2005 and up to 2012, I think. So if you have a 2012 SQL, you don't have to upgrade at all. And if you have a 2005 SQL, you're good to go. So SQL is very nice product. They are backward compatible. So if you don't feel that you need to, don't do it. It doesn't add anything to your deployment solution.
So now, and that's what I would say also, because then sometimes you got to export, import the feedback and data. Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Simple. That's what we like. So, all right. Well, that wraps up all of the Q&A. Can you just go back to the slide real fast, Johan, and hit the next one, please? Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Remember, October 1st, Capturing with OS Deploy. It's going to be a full week, a lot of information. I know Johan's going to be anticipating this for the next 2 weeks. He loves capturing. He corrects me all the time and gives me great feedback on this. So we're going to have a good week. So register for that, and then we'll have the Rohan's Top 10. So.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Have
Heather.
a good weekend. Take care.
Take care. Bye.